Alright, making some hardtack. Pretty much the easiest thing in the world to make. I'm using this incredibly special einkorn wheat flour, which is a super ancient grain that dates back to basically the caveman days. Some of the oldest wheat seed ever found in the world is from this einkorn variety. Also kind of cool because it's really low in gluten, which doesn't particularly affect me, but it affects some people. And then I've got this Himalayan pink salt, because we fancy. And then just some regular warm water, and this is where I'm going to be mixing it in with my KitchenAid beaters. When I'm baking stuff like this, I usually don't follow a specific recipe, so I just kind of like, oh, that's beautiful flour. So pretty. Look at that. I just have a general idea of like how much I want to make, and I just kind of in my head sort of like look at the volume of the material and kind of imagine how it's going to be when it's dough and flattened out, and then after having the moisture baked out of it, it's usually pretty easy to just kind of guesstimate. And the beautiful thing about hardtack, you know, is that it has so few ingredients. Before I add the water, I think I'm going to add the salt. So, you know, with something that only has 3 ingredients, basically, it's really easy to kind of visualize the end product. There's a lot of flour, so I'm adding a lot of salt. And I like my hardtack really salty, which also helps with the preservation and the shelf life. Cool fact: archaeologists have found hardtack from the American Civil War era in dry storage. It was still edible today, so if you do everything right, it keeps for, you know, over 100 years. Not that you'd ever really want to have 100-year-old hardtack, or even worry about making it just to last that long, but I just think it's kind of a fun, cool fact. So yeah, once again, just kind of relying on my observational senses to determine when everything's the way I want it to be. You know, in my mind I have this idea of sort of like the ideal texture for the dough, and in order to achieve that, I just keep adding, you know, a tiny amount of water until it reaches that perfect consistency that I'm looking for. And because it's hardtack and there isn't any like leavening or yeast, I don't have to worry about over mixing, letting the dough rest, any of that nonsense. Pretty much just mix it until I'm confident that it's completely dry, completely mixed in. Really, the only thing that I'm really worried about is chunks of dry flour in the dough. Or in this case, it's more like a batter. Yeah, this is just about right. Now all I have to do is get it to come off of the beaters without making too much of a mess. Perfect. So, here's my baking sheet, and it's non-stick, but I like to do this overkill. And I'm going to use bacon grease just like they did back in the frontier days. Such a versatile non-stick agent, and adds a nice little touch of flavor to the end product. Not really practical if you're vegetarian, but I'm not really, so this works for me. I like to be generous. There's plenty of grease, no reason to skimp. And make sure every square millimeter of my baking surface is amply coated, because if there's one thing I can't stand, it's a baked good sticking to a cookie sheet or a pan or whatever. That looks pretty good. All right. Next step, just gonna get a spatula here, scoop out my batter right onto that baking sheet. Feel free to leave pithy comments about my spatula technique. Alright. That looks pretty good. Alright, now I'm just going to smooth it out on the cookie sheet. I'm going to try to get a nice even layer, about 1/4 of an inch thick. And of course it's just fine if it's thicker than that, not a problem. God, that flour smells so good. I've used einkorn flour before, but never quite on this scale, more like an additive, or I cut regular white flour or baking flour with einkorn. And I've also eaten einkorn wheat berries, kind of as like a oatmeal substitute. Those are absolutely delicious. I'm expecting great things from this incredibly hearty and healthy version of hardtack I'm making. Getting pretty close to the target thickness here. I'm trying to make sure there aren't any like little peaks or valleys too on the surface, because I really want it to be a consistent width if possible. Alright, that looks pretty good. There's some kind of anomalous regions here, but that's alright. A little bit of inconsistency is kind of nice sometimes, and then you get a little bit of like a chewy patch. Although for optimal results, you want it to be as consistent as possible so that when it dries in the oven, it dries in a uniform, thorough way. Okay, so the last step here is just to basically create a little bit of division here so that you've kind of got like chunks that you can ration off. I'm just doing this by eye, it's not no measuring or anything overly strict like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. As you can see, it scores really nicely. In fact, we got some straight up through cuts, which is pretty cool. We go in the opposite direction here, just for a little panache. Who'd think that something as ordinary as hardtack could look so beautiful, am I right? So yeah, my through cuts are a little bit off, but that's okay. It'll be fine. The scoring will actually allow it to break once it's dry. So next step is going into the oven, and I'm gonna put it in there around like 250, maybe 300, with the door cracked, and until it's basically the level of dryness that I want. Thanks for watching.